All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today, and appreciate all of you who confirmed that you could see the screen and that you could hear us. Thanks for confirming that audio-visual check. We appreciate it. Today we're going to be talking about how to prevent a data disaster, more specifically, how to combat ransomware. And you can see the Gartner logos on the screen here. I just want to make a quick mention of that before we dive in. So Infoscale was named a Gartner Cool Vendor in the 2015 Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery section, and then also a 2016 Visionary in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. So I just wanted to make a quick mention of that. Also, just a few housekeeping items before we dive in. My name is Carla Federigo, and I'm the Director of Marketing with Infoscale. I wanted to share all of my contact details with you here. And I'd love to chat with you further, so please do reach out to me if you have any questions or comments or things that you'd like to discuss after the presentation. Also, if you would like a copy of the slides, they are available to you in the handout section. So you can go ahead and grab those there. If you have questions or comments throughout the presentation, please use the question tool, and we are going to come to Q&A at the end of the presentation, so we'd love to hear from you there. Also, we'd love for you to join the conversation. So you can find us on Twitter, our handle's at Infoscale. You can also find us on Facebook, on LinkedIn. So please do engage with us there on social as well. And then if you would like a recording of this presentation, it is going to be posted online. You'll be able to find it at www.infoscale.com/webinars. So generally, those are always posted within about 24 hours. All right, let's take a look at the agenda for today. So first, we're going to be talking about the evolution of ransomware. And then we'll look at the best practices for prevention. We'll talk about how to recover from an attack. And then we'll have a Q&A with a senior sales engineer. Today on the line we have Aaron Jordan. He's our senior sales engineer, has been with the company for years, and we will have him on the line for the Q&A, so get those technical questions in and he'll be available to answer them. All right, so starting off with a simple understanding of what ransomware is and how it's changed over time. Ransomware, we know, can take several different forms, but it's a type of malware that denies access to a device or to files until a ransom's been paid. So it's encrypting a user's files and then forces them to pay a fee to that hacker for them to regain access to their own data. Now, an even bigger problem sets in where ransomware encrypts files on a workstation, but then it can also travel across a network. And it can encrypt files on your network drives as well. So that's how one single infected user can bring an entire organization to a halt. Now, here is the evolution line of ransomware. Now, since computers have been in use, programmers have been able to create malicious software. Even earlier than 1986 or 1989, in 1971, the creeper virus, that was a really early example of how quickly malware can spread through systems. If you look at the introduction of high-speed encryption throughout 2006 to 2010, by 2007, right in between there, as much malware was produced in that single year than had been produced in the previous 20 years altogether. So that's how quickly malware is proliferating. And then if you take a look at 2016, today, here we are with CryptoLocker, Locky, CryptoWallet. We're going to talk about some of these specific examples in just a minute here. But this is where we saw the rise of Bitcoin as cryptocurrency. So we'll talk about that here in just a minute. But where that leaves us right now is that there are two types of organizations out there. There are those that have been breached and those that have been breached but simply don't know it yet. So here are some of those trends that we were talking about and how we've been seeing ransomware change over time. In the first quarter of 2016, there were almost 3,000 new malware modifications reported. Now we know it gets activated by a user that lets it in, starts modifying all the files on that system. And if you get one of those ransom demands, then paying it is going to involve an e-currency like Bitcoin. Then once the hackers verify that payment, they start the long process of decrypting all your files once they've provided the decryptor software. Now what we've seen is that can take days to be back up and running. That's why 72% of ransomware victims were unable to access their data for 2 days, up to 5 days. $100 million was paid in ransom. Now compare that to all of 2015, the entire year, only $25 million was paid in comparison. Now one big problem with ransomware is you have no idea for weeks or months. Generally comes in through a malicious phishing email that then a user will activate it. And for several weeks, it works slowly in the background, so you have no idea that it's even there. And it starts modifying all the files on your system based on the last date opened or the last date modified until you get one of these triggered ransom demands. So once those files are encrypted, they're going to display a screen like this, really explaining how to pay to unlock your files and perhaps a countdown timer that you must pay by a certain time or date. Now, in the past, the ransom started in the $300 to $500 range. But then fast forward to 2016, and the ransoms now being hit with ransoms in the thousands of dollars. Plus, they generally put in a countdown timer that as the hours pass, if you don't respond, that cost is going to increase. Now then, on top of that, there are so many strains of ransomware out there. CryptoLocker is one. It targets computers specifically running Windows, and it restricts access to those infected computers. Ransom32, it's a variety of ransomware as a service, which is really scary because it effectively puts the power to create ransomware into the hands of anyone, regardless of their technical know-how. There are many others on the list here too, as you can see. Locky is one that we want to focus on just for another minute here. We've heard of this one quite often. It renames all of your important files with the extension .locky. And Locky, we've seen, it's really been changing the game for a few different reasons here. Now first, it has a worldwide reach. And what we saw is that businesses throughout Europe, Japan, New Zealand, and Australia have been hit with these massive email spam campaigns carrying that malicious JavaScript software. And that attachment is going to install the Locky ransomware. Now even closer to home, businesses here are still being targeted with really similar attacks. Amazon.com is one that was targeted by a massive phishing campaign, and it was estimated to have sent out 30 to 100 million spam messages, all claiming to be an Amazon.com shopping order update. So Locky is really targeting businesses, and of course it has that network effect, like I mentioned early on, that one single user can then, it spreads through the network, and that single user can bring the entire department down. So a couple of ways to know if you're infected, and these are some of the symptoms that you might be infected with ransomware. So and then finally, if you see some file names with how to decrypt or decrypt instructions. So these are all symptoms that you have that ransomware attack. So what do? Immediately, what are the first 3 steps that you want to take? First, if you do get infected, you want to get that infected machine off the network. You just want to stop the malware from spreading. So you always want to assume that the malware can make use of that internet connection, spread itself to others. So you want to isolate the machine and stop all network communication from the spread of that malware. And then next, you want to reset your BIOS time. So this is going to give you some more time to prepare your backups, prepare your recovery. And according to Privacy PC, IT admins don't need to be afraid of that ransomware countdown timer, that countdown clock that I mentioned, if you just set your BIOS time back. So that's going to give you more time to just calm down, recover your key files, and eliminate the malware. Now third, if you are hit with malware, you want to roll back from a previous backup. Having that recent backup is going to make it easy for you to restore operations as quickly and painlessly as possible. But of course, we are going to talk about some more options here today. So now that we have a really good understanding of what ransomware is, how it works, we're now going to switch gears and start talking about the best practices of really how to prevent it. So we're going to get into some ransomware best practices, how to work against ransomware. And really, the truth is, if you lack a cybersecurity infrastructure for anti-malware, then you're at risk. And right now, none of us are immune to these types of high-profile attacks because everyone has irreplaceable data. So let's talk about how you can effectively and affordably take those proper preventive measures. You don't want to be stuck with having just one option of paying the ransom. We don't want to leave you in that situation. So let's get you a set of best practices and really help this from happening to you. First, I do have a really quick poll though. You guys have heard a bit from me, so I'd love to hear from you. So when it comes to ransomware, which of these is you? A, yes, I've been a victim of ransomware. B, no, I haven't experienced this type of security breach. Or C, I don't think I'll be affected by ransomware. You guys can use the question tool and type in your answer for that there. Looks like we had about 50% answer A and 50% answer B. So now we're going to move into looking at how to avoid ransomware. Now BDR can protect you, but only if you do it right. So here are a couple of screenshots from my backup and recovery account with Infrascale. Now by default, Infrascale keeps everything. You can see here in this example, so these are all the files on my desktop. Here's the System C Federigo. You can see that's my desktop, and this is my account where, in this case, it looks like I can go back, and I just picked a random date in this scenario for an example, of back to May of 2011. Now, of course, I don't really want to roll back to May of 2011 right now because I'd lose 5 years of data. But this is just an example to demonstrate that Infrascale keeps every single file ever backed up in every version of that file. Now, this is really, really important because that forever archiving is critical. Most BDR systems out there, they age content out after a few days, after a few weeks, maybe a month at the most. But ransomware, we learned, can take weeks to get into your systems discreetly. So it's not just the idea of having any old backup system in place, but you need a backup system with that forever archiving component. Now building on that, Infrascale, that account that I have, it's not just the backup and recovery software on my machine, right? So here's a quick snapshot of my dashboard. And this provides me a unified management console. Doesn't require VPN access. I can simply log in from any browser, even on a smartphone or a tablet. And from here, I can view activity alerts. I can monitor account usage, I can manage retention settings. So I have all this access right at my fingertips. Now, one particular setting that I want to show you and look at is the account level details. And so since we learned when ransomware goes through your system, it'll modify all the files that it touches. So if it's a file that we're backing up, we're going to recognize it as a changed file. So in our dashboard, in the backup account settings, we have these account level details. And there's an analytics tab of the last 24 hours, last 30 days. So all these analytics that you can see of which machine has the most changes. So what we did here is we took these analytics and we created a new monitoring alert. So this alert is called Anomaly Detection. If you have a large number of newly modified files, you want to know what happened and what's touching my data. So this is really important because it's a proactive approach. So let's take a closer look at anomaly detection in action. So in this quick video here, about a minute, we're going to see how to set up the anomaly settings. So you just simply go up to the settings tab and click on monitoring. And then you'll see the enable anomaly detection setting. This is where we let you set the threshold. Warning is going to be released when that threshold is passed. So this is how it works. We calculate a rolling average number of modified files, and that's happening over time for each device. And then if the modified file count for a backup passes that predetermined threshold, we'll release a warning. So if you're subscribing to error events, you'll get an email alert, and it will also automatically appear in the general monitoring page. So you can even open the details. You can see things like backup duration, total files processed, how many files were modified. And then if you just go in the manage action here, you can download the logs if you want to investigate at a file level. So again, nobody has this type of proactive alerting. None of the VDR solutions out there have this in place. So most of those systems, you're simply waiting to get infected and then trying to either pay the ransom, roll back to a previous backup. But again, even if you do pay the ransom, you have that wait time, 2 to 5 days. That was on the second or third slide that we looked at, right? It can take 2 to 5 days to be back up and running. And that's if you pay the ransom. Now, if you don't pay the ransom and you decide to roll back to a previous backup, how much data are you losing? Are you losing the past 2 weeks worth of work? Are you losing the last month worth of data? So I have another quick poll here that I want to launch. So when it comes to BDR, which of these is you? A, I can confidently roll back to a previous backup within 15 minutes. B, I wish I had backup and disaster recovery, but can't afford it. And then C, I still don't think I'll be affected by ransomware. So far, it looks like we have a couple of A's and a couple of B's. All right, so now let's talk about pricing, because that did come up earlier. I saw a question come through of, well, how much does this cost? And also, how do we address that issue of the guaranteed failover? So how do we address our guarantee for 15 minutes? Nobody else can offer that. Well, Infrascale delivers on-demand cloud backup DR as a service, or DRaaS, for the price of backup. Now we do this, so here's a quick comparison, where pricing with Infrascale, you can see, lets you save up to 70% in comparison to others. So with it's all based on the amount of data that you have to protect. So it's simply based on how many gigs or terabytes of data, right? So this is the cost of 10 terabytes of disaster recovery plus 3 years of cloud backup, an apples-to-apples comparison with Barracuda, Unitrends, Datto, and Infrascale. Now let's take a look at a closer competitive comparison. This chart is going to help summarize all of the things that you should be looking at when comparing different RAS solutions, right? And you can see that all the major solutions just don't stack up the way that Infrascale does. So like I mentioned, with Infrascale, you're guaranteed that 15-minute failover from any disaster, and it's just a fraction of the cost of backup. So just as a recap, Infrascale protects thousands of businesses globally with our 15 geographically dispersed data centers. We're protecting over 50,000 customers and partnering with over 900 MSPs worldwide, which means that we're in turn protecting over 1 million devices, and that number is growing all the time. And we have over 100 petabytes of data protected in our global grid. So next steps for you, I want to offer everyone, just for joining us today and being here with us, since we now know ransomware is the #1 cybersecurity threat, I'd like to offer everyone 60 days free to test it out for yourself and get up and running. So if you'd like to take advantage of that 60 days free, simply type into the question tool and let me know. All you need to write is 60 days free. And then from here, we're going to jump into the Q&A. I see lots of comments coming through, 60 days free, which is great. We'll get you set up with that. And then we're going to turn it over to Aaron Jordan. So Aaron is our senior sales. He's been with Infrascale for years. Try to stump him with all of your technical questions. I'd love to see that happen. So Aaron, are you on the line here? Let me see if I can unmute Aaron and bring him in. There we go.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great. So yeah, thanks guys for joining the webinar today. If you have any technical questions, please go ahead and start asking them in the questions box, and then I will get to them in the order that they arrive. All right. Any questions? Also, I see people asking for the 60-day free trial. That's good.
So Aaron, I've got a question, mate.
Sure.
Tell us about the ransomware and anomaly detection, and you know, how that stacks up against any other vendors in the space.
Sure, I'd love to. Actually, so we've got this solution within our product where it's called Anomaly Detection, and the idea is that if you get hit with ransomware, we can catch you before you're actually going to get completely ransacked, if you will. So the idea is we're going to monitor the change blocks on your files, and when we see something change at an unusual rate, so if we see a lot of files changing than they should, because you can set that threshold, what will happen is it'll notify you to let you know that something is going wrong. So you can then go in and verify if the files are being changed, and if they are at from that outside source, you then have the ability to put a stop to it right then and there. Now, the best part is, because Infrascale offers unlimited versioning, you have the ability to roll back to any point in time before the disaster struck. So you can get all your data back while you're making sure that it's not going to spread either further on that machine or across other systems. And again, that's added as part of our service as you start to take snapshots and backups of your environment. I did want to curtail that with saying the reason we want to bring that up is because it's unique in the industry. Nobody else has it. So right now, the best you can do is, hope that your antivirus catches it, or hope that your malware detects it. So on top of trying to prevent it with those other solutions, Infrascale will help you catch it early so that the disaster is not widespread. It's just over a small fraction of the files you maybe happen to have locked already. All right, I have a question here regarding the data centers. So how many data centers do you have? Can you outline? Yeah, we have 16 data centers worldwide, 7 are in the US. Out of all the data centers, You do have the ability to have Sarbanes-Oxley SAS70 SSAE16 certified data centers. They're also ISO 27001 and 2 and 3 certified. For the European data centers, for what it's worth, they do comply with Safe Harbor, even though that's kind of an old standard. We still do comply with those standards on top of all the new ones. But even better, we actually have options for CGIS compliant data centers. So if you have police stations that require FIPS 120 or 140 encryption and require end-to-end, the help on the other end to actually be certified by the FBI so that they can pass that secure government data, we do have CGIS data centers. So whether you're just backing up files and folders, all the way up to top secret data, we've got a data center that can actually cover that data. This also includes, but not limited to, FINRA, HIPAA, and the other regulatory bodies that might exist. Question here, you didn't share a cost, what's the pricing model? That's probably something we can cover down more along with the sales call with the sales rep, but I will say it's a very simple pricing model, and we're just looking at terabytes protected. So it's a service that will grow as you need it. It will fit in the spots from the small mom and pops all the way up to the major enterprises. There are some giant manufacturers that actually use our service right now. If I drop the names, you would know who they are. But the idea is we can cover you, again, from all the things from the mobile to, like we like to say, the mainframe. Do you support Linux? Yeah, so our appliance actually supports not only every flavor of Linux for files and folders and the bare metal, but we actually can boot some of those versions of Linux on our appliance so that if you lose a physical machine, you can virtualize it alongside your physical Windows and all your VMware and Hyper-V guests. So not just a file folder recovery, but a full-on resurrection of the environment. Let's see. I have, does the appliance throttle bandwidth usage during production times? So you actually have bandwidth tools, but more than that, and we have something called DDFS assisted introduced into our appliance, and what that allows you to do is it allows you to take the data that's backed up locally, and as I start to seed it to the secondary site's going to actually curtail that. It's going to say, hey, I don't actually need all of this data because I can rebuild you from this other site with the other machines that you've got backed up. And so what that looks like is, instead of sending terabytes of new data every time you snapshot a new machine or do another full backup, it only needs to send the blocks that make it unique to the other side. And to that end, it actually is basically our global dedupe that we have on the appliance, irrespective of operating system, file type, etc. It'll be able to globally dedupe the entire infrastructure, and then it shares that love to the cloud side. So it prevents you from sending unnecessary data. So on top of being able to save you the amount of data you can spend or send, you can actually use this the throttling capabilities to prevent it from saturating your network. And to that end, people in countries where the bandwidth is metered, like Canada, the UK, etc., they're going to love you for that because it's going to save you a lot of, or save them a lot of money when it comes to reporting back and forth and sending the data. What's your support model? Do you offer 24/7 support? Yeah, so it's 24/7, 365, US-based support. Half of us are in LA, half of us in Salt Lake City. You have a lot of options. You have email, live chat, ticketing, knowledge base, and even phone calls with a less than 2-hour SLA, which is unlike anything else in the industry. So we will get you an answer in under 2 hours from whatever your problem is. So definitely feel free to use that. I also mentioned too that unlike some of our competitors, the phone support isn't going to cost you extra. It's part of the service. So whether you need to get trained or you need to, just talk to somebody about an issue that's ongoing, or maybe you just need to find a little bit out about a new feature that's coming out, you can definitely contact their support, and we can help you with that. Let's see. What happens if my computer was stolen and I had a backup image, but I can't restore it to a new computer, but I can restore it to a new computer? Can you do that? Oh, yeah. So we have hardware independent recovery. So the idea is, if you, for example, started off with a Dell PowerEdge server and you ended up buying HP ProLiant server on the side as new hardware, You can actually use our bare metal solution to recover to a hardware-independent environment. So that is to say, unique environment. So the hardware doesn't need to be the same. So it's hardware-independent recovery. And to that end, you can use it to virtualize a machine as well. You can spin up a husk of a virtual machine, VM or Hyper-V, and then you can use this to boot into that environment and rebuild that machine. So you're not limited to your recovery options when it comes to the disaster recovery and bare metal. I have a lot of smaller clients. Do you have mass deployment tools? Yeah, actually we have the ability to not only create policies that you can apply on the fly, but take that policy, bake it into an installer, and tell that installer to automatically create the backup account, automatically configure the size, automatically phone home after it's configured everything, and then start the backup. So the idea is you create this one MSI and either push it using your favorite RMM, or you can plug it into your Active Directory on the domain controller under the GPO settings and then set the right permissions, and then it'll auto-deploy as soon as people log in with the right permissions. It'll deploy accordingly. Speaking of RMMs, who do you support? So we actually have a wide range of RMM support. Besides having native integration with ConnectWise, by that extension, LabTech is being integrated, but also working on AutoTask. We do have the ability to inject emails and SNMP traffic into any one of your RMMs. And that's to say that there is no limitation to the RMM that you may use, right? So maybe you have LabTech and then one day you switch over to Kaseya. Well, the good news is it's an outbound email or outbound SNMP traffic, and this way it'll catch the information, log it, and create tickets for you. So if you wanted to, you don't even have to add a dashboard to your life. You can just use your RMM. So that actually cuts down the workload of what you have to do, where you have to go. So it's actually nicely packaging everything into one spot. Let's see. If I want to back up laptops or roaming devices, can you do that? Yeah. So our solution allows you to install an agent. So we have, again, the appliance has both host level and agent level. And then we have our direct cloud, which supplements and fills in and even fits on the smaller environments, where you can use agents to back up laptops that are always moving. And then also, of course, Android and iOS devices as well, which I don't think was mentioned here today. But you basically get anything that's moving around constantly on the go, so that you can get those clean backups of your sales reps, for example, that happen to be, hitting the pavement trying to make some sales. Let's see. Anything else? Yeah. So let me just see if I have any more questions. Oh, here we go. How do I choose the date and restore point if I don't know when I took the ransom? Okay. So Marius, the way you can basically get the restore point is when you do a restore, you have the ability to roll back from any point in time. Now, like you mentioned, how do I know when to roll back to? So the best way to do that is, remember that anomaly detection that I talked about earlier? So what's going to happen is the anomaly detection is going to start warning you that something odd is happening. You've got an oddly increased amount of alerts that's going on. And from that point on, usually ransomware is anywhere from within the month to, I think the furthest one I've heard going back is 3 months. So you'll want to just basically do a subset restore of the files, for example, that you know are encrypted, and roll back from an older point into an isolated machine and then open those up. And if those files are still clean, then you should be good to go. If they're not, just roll back further back. Now, the good news is the way Infrascale does its snapshot technology, that if you happen to get hit with ransomware on, let's say, January, and you've been taking snapshots since last January, you don't have to worry about it going into our cloud and corrupting the rest of your data. It actually only moves to change blocks and will not spread self-executable items. So the idea is you'll know by the time you clean it up. Like once you find one file that's good, you're going to be able to tell that all the files will be good at that point on. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. Marcia, you asked about Kaseya. So I'll just reiterate. Kaseya is basically just like you just use the emails to output, or SNMP to output to Kaseya, so that you can keep track of the incoming alerts. And those alerts can consist of everything from how the backup jobs are doing to am I over quota? Are there any errors I should be aware of, etc. So there's a lot of different things that you can alter in that. I noticed that a poll just got launched. If you guys wouldn't mind, I guess this is the last poll, if you could go ahead and just take a look at that and give us some feedback. Would you like to learn more about ransomware or BDR for Infrascale? It could be either yes, I'd like to learn more about Infrascale failover DRAS. Yes, educational ransomware or BDR info would be helpful. Or no thanks, not now, maybe later. So go ahead and get those last votes in, and then I'll go ahead and I see that no more new questions have come in. So you know, as you fill that out, go ahead and ask more questions, and then we'll just make sure that those are answered in the timely fashion. I'll go ahead and hand this off to Carla so you can do some housekeeping before the close to ensure that all your questions may be answered on that side as well.
Great, thanks so much, Aaron, and thank you everyone for participating and for all those questions that came through. Again, like Aaron mentioned, this last poll here, would you like to learn more about ransomware or BDR from Infrascale? A is yes, I'd like to learn more about failover DRAS. B is yes, educational ransomware or BDR info would be helpful. And C is not right now, maybe later. So everyone participate in that last poll there. And I'll give everyone another minute or so to answer that. And then any last minute questions, make sure to get those in now. We have just another minute or two on the presentation here, and then again, thank you so much for your time and being here today. Any last questions coming through, Aaron?
I don't see any. I just see a bunch of thank yous. So thank you guys for attending. If you do have any outstanding questions, don't worry. Just let Carla or myself know. You can email us at team@Infrascale to make sure that we get somebody in contact with you. We can do a demo for you. We can specialize a test environment for you so that you can actually really kick the tires on this. And then, of course, you'll have an SC assigned to you as you trial this. You might even get me. And the idea is we'll make sure that we're there for you as you test this to make sure all your questions are answered. So we do thank you for taking the opportunity to learn about ransomware and BDR and protecting your company's future.
Great, thank you guys so much for joining. We really appreciate your time today, and we very much look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks, everyone.